Apple shrinking or removing the notch has always been kind of the butt end of jokes for me when it comes to iPhone upgrades because it's something that people go crazy over. I see a ton of people that get excited for a smaller notch or removing the notch, but I try to remind everyone how little of a difference it actually makes. That is literally the part of your phone you look at the very, very least, and once it's gone, I'm sure someday it'll be possible, but once that day comes, you're gonna get used to it like that, and you're just gonna keep using your phone the same way you always have. But that being said, now you know that I don't care about the subject. Let's talk about the potential of Apple shrinking it this year. Go. So there was a leaked image that's floating around the internet. It's supposedly from iOS 14, but there's a lot of people that go back and forth on the legitimacy of it. I, for one, am in that department because it feels like even with iOS leaks in the past, we never got icons of products that weren't to come out this far in advance. Like, there were people who were getting details on iOS 12 or iOS 11 before it launched, and they never really got icons or, like, this detailed images before, so it's very possibly a placeholder. It may or may not reflect the actual design. There are credible leakers that are saying it's real and fake, so I don't know which side to fall on it, but I do like to speculate on Apple's perspective on why or why not they would go with a design like this. So obviously when you look at the photo, you think, hey, that notch is a little bit smaller, which is, good. I don't think anybody would be that upset with a notch smaller. However, every time I say that, I always see like 5 people in the comments or on Twitter go, I like the notch. It's an iconic look. It's just, it screams iPhone when I see it, and if they would change it, it would just look like a cheap Android, and I don't like it. This is a very specific type of Apple sheep that exists out there, okay? I've interacted with lots of them. These are the people that are so Apple sheep that they will be so loyal to Apple that they will say and cling to what Apple has done in the past and then restrict and be against anything they do in the present because they have that much loyalty to Apple. But anyway, it's weird. Other Apple sheep will get on board with anything new Apple releases, which means that, yes, when it's in its leak form, it's not that interesting, and then when it actually comes out, now we're on board with it. That's the department I fall into, if you couldn't notice. But why would Apple shrink the notch? Well, maybe because there's a lot of complaining for it. I mean, the tech community, at least, is very vocal about, hey, Galaxies have camera holes, or OnePlus had pop-up cameras, and iPhone doesn't seem to be doing anything. They're just sticking with that standard old notch, and like most of the tech community thinks, if the front of the device does not change, then nothing has really changed. Doesn't matter if the internals are better, the battery life's better, the cameras are better. None of that matters as long as the front of the phone looks the same as the last gen. It's basically identical, which to them I say, you're gonna get really, really bored with smartphone upgrades in the future. But so, okay, let's say Apple wants to cater to the tech community a little bit and make the notch a tad smaller. The thing they would have to do in order to make this concept or make this iOS 14 leak possible, given the location of the earpiece in this photo, is somehow combined 3 of the Face ID sensors in use right now into one, because obviously we're not getting rid of the front-facing camera, so that's probably going to stay on the right, but on the left, you're going to have your infrared camera, your true dot projector, and your IR sensor all coupled into one module, which may not be that impossible. I mean, some of you guys know about the Huawei P40 Pro. That has a depth sensor and an IR sensor within the camera module at the top, and that's front-facing, and that's definitely smaller than Apple's True Depth camera system. So maybe there is a way that can combine a few sensors, but I imagine it would probably have to be a pretty drastic internal redesign to Face ID. I mean, obviously Face Unlock would probably work the same way, but it would take a lot of work for the hardware team and the software team to have to re-engineer a way to have a 3D map of someone's face so Apple doesn't look like they're compromising on security and settling with something that's less secure. So you have to find a way to have all the benefits of Face ID, but at the same time remove 75% of the hardware that uses Face ID right now. So would they go through all of that work just to make the notch a little bit smaller because the tech community complains about it? I have my doubts about that, because in case you didn't know, the tech community, very small sliver of the entire smartphone market, and I'm sure Apple's polling and questioning people internally and figuring out what most consumers care about. And the honest truth is, if you ask regular consumers about their iPhone, especially if they have one with Face ID or something like that, the notch is actually not that big a deal. If you looked at YouTube comments and tried to build a wish list based on that, you'd be like, oh man, people hate the notch. But outside of that, most people are like, oh yeah, there's got to be a place for the camera, who cares? Because they're not looking at that part of their phone, and even if it was gone, it would add nothing to the experience. It would be like, okay, I can put the time there, and yay, I can have my annoying carrier letting me know that their name is on the screen at all times. And I know some of you are like, well, I want the battery percentage to be on the display at all times. Okay, yeah, have fun. They could add that to the old iPhones via software update if they wanted to. But my point is, with the notch shrinking, it would not change the functionality, and that would be a whole lot of work for the hardware and software teams just to slim down that notch a little bit more, which is why I have doubts about this rendered image. Now, there are other ways they could go about shrinking the notch. The one I've been pitching to them for years is do what other Androids have done, which is embed the earpiece into the top of where the glass meets the stainless steel, or the aluminum if you have a broke boy phone. But if you move the earpiece more upwards, and it could still double as a stereo speaker, then you could bunch together that true depth camera system and have a technically slimmer notch. But yeah, this doesn't get you anywhere closer to the idea of removing it like so many people want. But honestly, most people I've heard complain about the notch are people who don't have a phone with one, because if they did, they probably wouldn't care. Either way though, this leak does not support the idea that the earpiece is being moved up near the top so that you could bunch those true depth camera sensors together. But the biggest indicator that Apple could be doing something with the notch this year is actually not any of these iOS 14 leaks. It actually has more to do with the screen sizes we've known for months now. So Ming-Chi Kuo and other leakers out there have reported that there is going to be a 5.4-inch iPhone, really small, really tiny. And when you do the math on how small a phone that is, along with the size of the true depth camera system, along with that earpiece and everything, it doesn't sound like it's gonna fit. If you try to imagine an iPhone that small and that compact, it wouldn't really be able to hold the notch in its current state. So I know this is not the answer a lot of you want to hear, but it's possible they may do something different just for the 5.4-inch model, and then the rest of the iPhones coming out in September, they're all just gonna have the normal size notch, and there may be some type of compromise with that 5.4-inch model, whether the earpiece moves up, or combining those sensors, or maybe making Face ID a little bit weaker or something, and that 5.4-inch model becomes like the slightly more affordable iPhone. There's no leaks or evidence to suggest this, but my point is just they can't really keep that 5.4-inch form factor, which we're hearing from so many leakers, and have the notch stay the same size. So making the notch smaller in some way, shape, or form, who knows, maybe they could just slim down the side bezels and keep all the cameras and earpiece where they are right now, but just, you know, have a little bit less bumper zone between the display and the cameras. So a smaller notch is definitely possible. I just don't think it's necessarily going to look like the way it does in these iOS 14 leaks, which again could or could not be real. But my point is just that Apple probably does not see it as a big deal to remove the notch this year, because Apple knows from their consumer base it's not that huge a complaint, not that many people really care about it. It's really just a tech community thing. But as we're running out of things to add or change with the iPhone this year, I mean, I'm gonna be really upset if they don't at least have 120 hertz and it just turns into, you know, camera upgrades and squared off edges. So who knows, maybe they're gonna take any upgrade they can get. But what tactics would you like to see Apple combat the notch with? Or are you in that department of people that honestly just do not care? That's me. But feel free to hit me up over on Twitter. Join my Discord if you'd like to chat more about this subject there. There's this guy Kuzith who says Lamau to everything I ever say. It's hilarious. So shout out to Kuzith. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I had my blood drawn today. Don't freak out, okay? I'm not infected. I'll see you in the next one.